Good evening, everyone. This is the Infowars Nightly News. I'm Darrin McBreen. It is Friday, July 27th, 2012. And here's a quick look at what's coming up.
Tonight on the Infowars Nightly News, Darrin McBreen follows up on yesterday's bombshell about the UN gun treaty that does ban guns. We focus on Article 15, which is a gateway for foreign troops to enforce the UN's gun-grabbing treaty. Plus, the Second Amendment wins an altercation in a Salt Lake City grocery store.
Then, before the suspect could find another victim, a citizen with a gun stopped the madness.
Also, we have confirmed reports straight from Big Sis that she is using drones for our, quote, public safety. And Aaron Dykes sits down with Fleshing Out Skull and Bones author Kris Millegan. This is a marathon interview you won't want to miss. All this and more on tonight's Infowars Nightly News.
All that and more coming up during the next hour, but we begin this evening with the Trojan horse that is the UN Arms Trade Treaty. The document has been leaked. We have analyzed it thoroughly, and it does ban guns. Aaron Dykes posted a detailed analysis of the treaty. You can see it right there on Infowars.com. Please read the article. Spread this information to everyone you know who values our Second Amendment. Because the effort to disarm America is underway. We're going to take a look at some of the specifics in the treaty. Gun registries. That's a list of everyone who owns a firearm. The UN will naturally have access to all this information, along with our own corrupt government. They want a list of background checks. They want to control the import and export of firearms of all types, small arms included. And the treaty also obligates states to establish national control systems. So there is no specific provision for individual persons, individual gun owners, contained in this dangerous treaty. And you know the mainstream media is going to do everything they can to cover this up. They've already launched their aggressive propaganda campaign. And right here, here's an article today. This is a whitewash article from AP, which includes a fact check. Treaty unlikely to curb U.S. gun rights is the title. And I tell you what, you put the establishment media fact check side by side to our analysis and next, put it next to the actual document itself. And there's no doubt about it. This treaty is about complete disarmament of the American people. If you still don't believe it, or if you're not totally convinced by now, wait, there's more. We're going to go over some more, folks. I mean, this is huge. I can't stress enough how vitally important all this information is. Because we are talking about the last line of defense. The battle line has been drawn. Let's go back. I want to take a look at some more of this Article 15. And here it is, Article 15, international assistance. In fulfilling the obligation of this treaty, and that means after Obama signs it and it gets passed in the Senate, the United States will be considered obligated to the UN. Never thought I'd live to see the day. But Article 15 goes on to say that other states, when they say other states, or let's say they say state parties, what they really mean is other countries, all right? So state parties shall afford one another to the widest measure of assistance, and it even says that other countries will be allowed to take part in investigations. So they'll be permitted to investigate American citizens. They can even take part in prosecutions and judicial proceedings in relation to any violation of the UN Arms Treaty. So there you have it, an effort to totally disarm the American people, and it includes foreign intervention. And if you don't believe that they are training foreign troops on U.S. soil, take a look at this exclusive video shot in Chicago. This actually shows Polish military and FBI. They're training with Illinois National Guard. That's right, Polish troops on American soil. And I don't know if you noticed, somewhere in the video it actually shows Polish troops. They participate with firearms moving American citizens. It's even got Boy Scouts in there somewhere. Now, I mentioned earlier that the treaty, the UN Arms Treaty, it includes aggressive background checks. And we're going to take a look right now at a video that was just taken a couple days ago with Barack Obama. And as timing would have it, you know, following the recent tragedy in Aurora, Colorado, well, Barack Obama had this to say about gun control.
But I also believe that a lot of gun owners would agree that AK-47s belong in the hands of soldiers, not in the hands of criminals. That they belong on the battlefield of war, not on the streets of our cities. I believe the majority of gun owners would agree that we should do everything possible to prevent criminals and fugitives from purchasing weapons. That we should check someone's criminal record before they can check out a gun seller. That a mentally unbalanced individual should not be able to get his hands on a gun so easily.
All right, that's key right there. What he said at the end right there is key. A mentally balanced individual. And, you know, on the surface, that sounds fine, right? I mean, who would argue with that? We want to make sure that you're sane, you're not a lunatic before you purchase a gun. But who does the government consider sane? You know, that's the key right now, because now it's up to them. They are in control. They are ones who decide who is sane enough to purchase a firearm or who is sane enough to actually own a firearm. And we've read the documents where they consider, you know, returning vets to be potential terrorists, very unstable. I mean, anyone with post-traumatic stress disorder, they're not getting a gun, folks, man. I'm telling you, they'll probably even diagnose people or vets with PTSD that don't even have it. All right, so this is getting out of control. You know, and this got me thinking about all these lists that are out there right now that the government put together where they consider, you know, average American citizens as dangerous. For example, now the Patriot movement is on the FBI's radar. LA Times even released a report that characterizes the sovereign citizen movement, that's me, and they consider that now a major threat. They even say it's on par with Islamic terrorism. It actually states that there are more than 100,000 Americans, that all those people are domestic terrorists as a result of their affiliation with the Patriot movement. So how many of those people will pass a UN background check? Because if you're a Tea Partier, for example, or if you value your Second Amendment, if you're a constitutionalist, chances are they're going to think that, you know, you're going to be put in that terrorist or potential terrorist category. It says it right there. Chances are they're not going to allow you to have a gun. And that's just one of the many terror watch lists that have surfaced lately. Oh, here we go. What you're looking at right now, this is a screenshot from the Activist Post where they list 25 reports that can put you on the terror watch list. And, you know, this was created for local police and federal authorities to respond to, you know, this is basically an implementation of the Citizen Spy Program, or what they call the Snitch Program. The FBI has now made it public, and this is their Communities Against Terrorism. They have flyers, and they ask the public to report suspicious activity. And what they consider suspicious, well, as you can see right here, they're simply everyday activities. Things like, well, they want you to be on the lookout for people who travel long distances, people with burn marks, people who pay with cash. Let's say you have an anti-government bumper sticker. You might be a terrorist. Let's say you're new to the area, or let's say you're reluctant to provide personal information when you go rent a car, for example. I mean, the list goes on and on. If you're wearing a backpack, if you're into martial arts, I mean, the list is out of control. Take a look for yourself. It's on Infowars.com. Just search for, it's called 25 reports that can put you on the terror watch list. Check it out. All right, and I think that, you know, that list is important to point out because it clearly demonstrates just how out of control our rogue government has become. And, you know, they're even making us domestic terrorists. So, you know, and who do they consider mentally unstable? You know, so if they're going to put us on a terrorist list, chances are they will consider you and me to be mentally unstable. And if you don't think our military is capable of gun confiscation, well, we're about to show you a practice run in New Orleans. They actually did this. Check it out.
You say guns will be taken?
Yeah, no one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
Today in New Orleans, they got a lot tougher on the holdouts.
Police department, anyone home?
Not only the flooded areas, but New Orleans' driest and wealthiest neighborhoods, too. Police department! The police and National Guard going street by street, house to house, sometimes entering open houses with guns drawn, and instructions to disarm anyone inside.
Let's go to Kris in Oklahoma. Kris, you're on the air on the Alex Jones Show. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Hells Ranger, how's it been?
Good. It's good here, man. How about yourself?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. I was with the 45th Infantry Brigade and Delta Company, 1st at the 279, 2nd Platoon. During Hurricane Katrina, I'm kind of calling it in on yesterday's subject. I'm sorry about that.
It's all right.
But it's just, I've always wanted to get a hold of you guys and kind of get the word out there for those that still have that slight hesitation in the back of their head that gun confiscation can't and won't happen here. It already has. And I was only 21 years old, just really gung-ho, really dedicated to the Army, especially to the infantry. And I did whatever I was told.
And what did they ask you to do?
The first thing we did was we got a 3-week, a book full of 3-week-old 911 phone calls, right? And then we had to go around and answering all the phone calls. So we were like cadaver dogs for about 3 weeks. And in between them, we would run night missions. And here's the thing. A lot of people may think that they'll see this on the news or they'll have time to get ready when the crap hits the fan or whatever. It's just, it's a truck, you know what I mean? It's a group of trucks. They pull up, they stack right on your home, as we did, and we broke entry. Yeah, we would yell out, Oklahoma Army National Guard, is anybody in need of assistance? But that's as we were booting in the door.
But wait a minute. It sounds like you weren't part of the Oklahoma National Guard. I mean, you were U.S. military. Yeah,
I was activated. I think about a week after Katrina, I was watching it on the news, and Sheriff Kamiko of Fox 23 told me before my unit even got a hold of me that I was going to New Orleans.
Wow. So
we got sent in, and we were the very, very first boots on the ground. Alpha Company.
And you were confiscating firearms?
Left and right, yes. And we were also monitoring the New Orleans police because we kept having, like the first day we had this little beautiful redheaded lady come up.
All right, wait a minute. We're almost out of time. Will you stay on the line for us, please? I want to continue with you on the other side. Stay on the line with us. This is fascinating. We're going to continue this right here on the Alex Jones Show. We'll be right back.
That happened today in this wealthy neighborhood where homeowners had armed themselves to protect their mansions. Residents were handcuffed on the ground. In the end, police took their weapons but let them stay in their homes.
They were a little bit threatened because our weapons were bigger than their weapons.
Chris Montgomery says he'd rather be in Iraq than patrolling American neighborhoods.
Walking up and down these streets, you don't want to think about the stuff that you're going to have to do. Somebody pops around the corner.
I mean, shooter in America.
Yeah.
We have Chris on the line from Oklahoma relating a story about gun confiscation in New Orleans and that entire region following Hurricane Katrina several years ago. And Chris, go ahead. You were describing how you and your team were kicking in doors and confiscating firearms from people. Did anybody resist? Did anybody ever shoot back? What happened?
Well, we had a couple of people resist verbally, and they got stuffed and cuffed very violently. We throw them in the back of the 5-ton or the deuce and a half or whatever, and then we take them out to the Greyhound bus station, which was the police station at the time. Like what I was saying, like before we came up, or before the break, I think it was like the second day we were there, this redheaded lady came up to our platoon's area, and she sat, or to our company area, she sat on the curb with her knees in her chest, just rocking back and forth, crying uncontrollably. She sat there for almost 27 hours, just refused to move. We talked to her, we did everything we could, just didn't want to, you could tell she had been through enough. She'd been repeatedly raped by men in NOPD masks and NOPD uniforms.
Oh, you're kidding me.
So we were told, at that point we were told the NOPD obviously isn't our friend. We need to start watching them. The FBI had us out there at Cooter Brown, which is the NOPD sheriff's brother's bar. It's like the big cop bar there in New Orleans.
Just so people know, NOPD's New Orleans Police Department, just for people who know.
Yeah, definitely. Or the police department.
So a lot of those cops were then just total rogue. I mean, we saw a video of some of them going in and looting retail stores and things like that, but they were raping women down there?
Definitely. Raping women. They were We got two separate women that came to our company alone, and when I was there, I met cats from the California Guard, Indiana Guard, you name it, everybody was. And
but how
it was just a free for all. Police from all over the country, Dallas County, Dallas, Texas sheriffs down there.
But how did you and your team justify to yourselves and each other that gun confiscation would help this situation when it was a free for all? I mean, isn't that a time when citizens need to be able to defend themselves?
It never, like I said, I was just ignorant as hell, and that's kind of something that I worry about with the kids today. If they really realize what they're doing. I had no idea. The only time it ever occurred to me that something may be wrong is we came up. We were down by the old French district. We came up to this man's house. He had a big wooden sign that says, "I'm here alone with my dog and my shotgun. Looters beware." We thought, it's funny. Everyone stopped and took pictures of the sign, but eventually we took his guns. And we left him there with nothing.
So now that you know what you know, now that you're listening to the Alex Jones show and you're informed, what would you advise people to do if this happens again?
Well, I called. I mean, no offense. I mean, Mike, we love everything you do. I'm a big fan of the Health Ranger, but I was hoping to get a hold of Alex for the fact that what do you do when they stack right? You know what I mean? And they're prepped to come into the home. There's no negotiating with us. Trust me. There was no negotiating.
Yeah.
If you resisted, you died. That were the orders. You go after a gun or you die.
Yeah, but well, I mean, this is invaluable information. I apologize. We only have a limited time here. I got to let you go. We've got so much more coming up here, but fascinating. I hope you call back and get to Alex as well. I'll pass on this conversation to Alex and let him know. But that's some frightening information, and I just hope that the military, that the members of the military say no. They refuse to engage in gun confiscation, because no doubt there could be outbreaks of violence and a lot of needless death and bloodshed if that happens. But thank you for your call, Kris. That's very concerning.
It was traumatic. All of a sudden, they were banging on the front door, the side door, and the back door. They said, "Let us in." I'm saying, "Look at all my food. I got plenty of food." They kept pushing me back, and ended up like this.
Then, Patty showed them a small revolver she was carefully holding in the palm of her hand. A camera crew was there to capture what unfolded next.
I said, "It's not even loaded." And I dropped it on the floor.
You got a gun left.
Well, they punched me in the face. Left now. Look at my black and blue marks. Look at...
You said guns will be taken?
Yeah, no one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
All right, now, I want to show you something because, the UN has wanted to disarm the American people for a very, very long time. Right there behind me, that is a picture of that's actually a sculpture that's in front of the UN building in New York. Wish we had a picture of the actual building, but that's actually actual sculpture. And, you can see right there, that, my friends, is a .357 revolver with a knot tied in the barrel. It is not a broken bomb. It's not a broken missile. All right, so there you have it. Enough said. I thought it was important to follow up that piece with a report, and I just saw this. Now, here are two great examples of how to stop massacres from happening to begin with. Now, earlier this week, we showed you video surveillance footage of a senior citizen. This guy protected himself, possibly saved the lives of multiple people inside an internet cafe. As there they go, right there, those are two robbers that entered the building, but they will eventually get chased out by an armed senior citizen. Here he comes. He's in the back there. There he is. They call him Grambo instead of Rambo. Look at this. See, this is how it's done right there. And those two guys got shot, right? They lived, but Grambo took him out and possibly saved lives in the process. Now we have a report coming out of Salt Lake City where a citizen with a gun, he stopped a crazed man with a knife as this guy began stabbing people. This was just last night in a store in downtown Salt Lake. I guess he purchased the knife in the store, and then he turned around and started stabbing people. He stabbed one person in the head. He got another guy in their stomach. Their hands and arms got all cut up by this lunatic. I guess there were 2 victims, blood everywhere, until an armed citizen pulled out his gun and stopped the madness. Let's take a look.
Into a weapon. Within seconds, the knife-wielding man seriously injured 2 people. Then, before the suspect could find another victim, a citizen with a gun stopped the madness. And officers had high praise for the gun-carrying man who ended the hysteria.
This was a really volatile situation that could have gotten even worse. I mean, we can only assume that, judging from what we saw, it could have gotten a lot worse. So he was definitely in the right place at the right time.
All right, so those are 2 excellent examples of how the Second Amendment allows us to defend ourselves. Meanwhile, the Second Amendment is being attacked on all fronts, not just the UN Arms Treaty, but let's take a look at what the Democrats are up to, as Democratic senators have also snuck in a gun control amendment that it's buried inside, of all places, a cyber security bill. Let's take a look.
And so if you look at the ads from the NRA and the groups even further over, the Gun Owners of America, their basic complaint is that the Chuck Schumers of the world want to take away your gun, even if it's the hunting rifle your Uncle Willie gave you when you were 14. And I think it would be very important for those of us who are for gun control, some rational laws on guns, to make it clear once and for all that is not our goal.
All right, so there's a face you can trust, right? I mean, come on. They're attacking our Second Amendment on all fronts, and we're actually gonna switch gears right now from gun control to drone control, as Big Sis says that drones are going to be used for public safety. That's right, the Department of Homeland Security, maybe we start calling it drone land security, they're preparing to use surveillance spy drones for our safety, according to Janet Dung Beetle Napolitano, who said that they will be utilized to give DHS situational awareness in large public safety matters or disaster. And notice how they always say it's only for emergencies, it's only for disasters, we're only going to use the drones for border control. We'll only use it to stop drug smugglers, right? I mean, come on. Meanwhile, the FAA predicts that there will be 30,000 drones over U.S. skies by the year 2020. 30,000 drones. I actually talked with Rosalind Peterson of the Agriculture Defense Coalition earlier this week, and she thinks that's a low estimate. She thinks there's going to be many, many more drones, and I tend to agree with her. Police departments all across the country, they're buying drones left and right, with the help from the DHS, I might add. And they want to spy on Americans. They want to spy on you and me. And guess what else? They've also given the green light for police departments to deploy, it's the Shadow Hawk mini drone helicopter, and this thing has the ability to, well, it could tase you. It could, it has 2 12-gauge shotguns that are loaded on it, and it even has grenade launchers. So, and if you think I'm kidding, it's happening right here in Montgomery County. The Montgomery County Sheriff's Office has one of those drones. So, but that's for our safety, right? All right. So, thank you, Janet Napolitano. You know, she says that these drones are for our protection, that most of them are going to be for, you know, taking pictures of forest fires. So, but they're armed with shotguns and grenade launchers. So, I don't know. Okay. Hey, yesterday we had a report from Patrick Henningsen. It was a very interesting report on the Olympic security. Now we have part 2 of that report. Here it is.
London at the official site of the London 2012 Olympics. As we can see, the whole city is gearing up for this massive event. It's going to be about sports. It's going to be about people from all over the world coming to support their country, fanfare, but it's also about merchandise, one-eyed beasts, and troops. Lots and lots of army troops. There is no public access. The site is well sealed by invitation only.
Much to do in the alternative media, mostly, and also on the floor in the House of Commons, has been made of G4S's failure to supply 10,000 security staff for the Olympic site. But most likely, this contract was set up to fail in order to open the doors for troops on the streets of London.
As you can see, there is a very large military presence. We're not sure which branch of the military these particular soldiers are from, but it only stands to reason, as in a total of 17,000 troops are currently being deployed in and around London to cover security and public evacuation contingencies during this Olympic 2012 Games. We did not have the proper security credentials, but yet we gained entrance into the main site. And again, there is the Red Berets from the British Army, I believe. They'll be covering the shortfall of the G4S security debacle during this Olympics. Whoa, there they are, making their presence known. I'm not sure if these are British troops or if they're foreign or NATO troops. Let's try to find out. They're not carrying any weapons. If something did happen, if there was an incident, I don't think they would be able to do a whole lot. Not any more than a normal police officer would, or even a normal qualified security guard. If we're lucky, we'll be able to catch one. Oh wait, hold on, there we go. There's one of the guys we're looking for. He's busy protecting from Islamic extremists. So let's see. There he is. Members of the military. It's not a bad thing having the troops around because it's great. You can pose for pictures with the kids. It's really fun for the whole family. As you can see, they're really enjoying that. Thanks, guys. Nice one, guys. Yes. But again, it's about acclimating the population to the presence of military troops and heavily armed officers all the time at every major event. But their presence is absolutely unmistakable. Everywhere you go, there are troops all over this site, in the village itself, which is where I'm at, and at all the entranceways to all the public transport. Iraq, Afghanistan, Sierra Leone, and now our troops are being deployed in East London to provide security for a sporting event. Oh, how far we've come in the 21st century. And it's all about getting us used to troops in our lives every day on the street, keeping us safe. And right now in 2012, the Olympics is about this. It's about money. A lot of the major banks are behind this event, including companies like Barclays, who basically were given massive tax breaks, and the government would promise to look the other way on a number of infractions in exchange for sponsorship. And that's Barclays. This is Visa here. God knows what deal they were given in exchange for their support of the 2012 games. One of the main sponsors of the 2012 games, Cisco, a cloud system, or cloud memory, cloud computing, and the Cisco servers are the ones that are handling the face recognition technology, which has been deployed all over the site. Again, they want to let you know that you are being watched, and Cisco is providing the computing power for that technology. No access into the Cisco area unless you have the proper pass, or this lady will send you home. And of course, one of the biggest talking points about this Olympics is the security. They're everywhere in the thousands. One of the biggest concerns for any public event, naturally, is whether the people are going to be safe and secure. But the question is, what is the threat? We saw earlier the heavily armed police. This is the G4S variety of security, ready for anything, ready for any eventuality. Here we are again, just outside the main site. And one of the main things to sort of pay attention to here is that the site, the Olympic site itself, is totally self-contained, completely and hermetically sealed. So you have to ask yourself the question, why on earth would you need to employ 10,000 security to patrol a site that is really nothing more than a square mile at the most? And also on top of that, why you would need to deploy the more British Army soldiers that are currently stationed in the whole of Afghanistan. You really got to ask yourself these questions. The site is completely secure and be very easy to control access and egress with a normal amount of security staff, basically trained with police to help.
Of course, when it comes to the Olympics, nothing is more important than marketing, and we've seen some very strange and bizarre things around the marketing of the London Olympics. The children's cartoons have some of the most warped and disturbing computer-generated characters one has ever seen. But as bad as that is, nothing could prepare you for the one-eyed monster and his evil twin, Og and Magog.
Yes, it's all about the kids. They could have thought of anything. It could have been the British Lion. It could have been the Beefeater. It could have been the Buckingham Palace Guards or the British Bulldog. But they chose a one-eyed Cyclops as the mascot for London 2012. God knows what was going through their head when they concocted this little beast. This is the satanic toy, the one-eyed beast. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Read into that what you will, but is genuinely the most frightening kid's toy ever made in the history of sports or anything like that. And then we have the one-eyed Beefeater, also a satanic representation of the famous Beefeaters from the Tower of London. And changing of the guard, again, the one-eyed Antichrist type caricature, which they're selling to kids. And there he is, the official mascot of the Olympic Games, the Wenlock Olympic mascot. Absolutely frightening thing for kids. But again, this is what they're pushing this year. God knows what it means and what it's for, but we hope we don't have to find out. An incredible representation of occultic and other mainstream religion prophecies. Of course, the Antichrist was one-eyed. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, etc., etc. But yes, that is the World Olympic logo mascot. very pleasant and somewhat scary, if you ask me. Really a disgusting, evil, vile, disturbing little creature. And these are everywhere, plastered all over London, in every shop, every off-license, every department store, every tube station. You'll find little versions of this. Incredible. They love the one-eyed beast. Everyone wants a picture with the one-eyed beast. Everyone wants to get photographed with this cyclops. Millions of people are going to be photographed with the cyclops over the next 2 weeks. You'll see millions of images on Facebook and the social networks of people with the one-eyed cyclops beast, the satanic mascot of the London 2012 Olympics. Isn't he wonderful? Call it overkill, call it security theater, call it anything you want, but one thing is certain: the amount of security and police presence and heavy arms and military hardware surrounding this site in Stratford, East London is unprecedented. So let's just hope that there's not another 7/7 type event being staged by some of our rogue operatives in the various agencies this summer. It would be great to see these games go off without a hitch. That's what we're hoping for. This is Patrick Henningsen for Infowars.com.
You know, it seems like every time I host the news, I cover at least one TSA story, and this time is no different. We have a clip I want to show you right now. This is from Luke Rudowski from We Are Change, and he covers an incident that occurred in Union Station in Chicago, and there is a citizen journalist who, you know, he's a roaming correspondent for wearechange.org, and he was labeled a terrorist, and he was threatened with arrest for, oh my God, he filmed a TSA checkpoint. Well, you got to see it to believe it. Let's take a look.
All right, We Are Change is very happy to announce that we have a new correspondent in the Midwest, Julio Raseo of Illinois. Now, 2 weeks ago, Julio released a great video showing how TSA agents were setting up a checkpoint at the Union train station in Chicago.
We have TSA agents. You know, these aren't police officers. They don't have a right to grope us. They don't have a right to wear any badges. They're not authorized law enforcement agents, yet they have the audacity to do what they do at the airports. They have the audacity to come to our train stations.
Now, the video was a big hit, even with Amtrak police who worked within Union Station, and they actually targeted and found Julio a week later when he was having dinner at Union Station, came up to him and tried to intimidate and harass him. But as a good journalist always does, he took out the video camera and recorded everything that happened.
What's the law?
Are you going to listen, or you going to be kicked out of here and you're going to piss me off?
No, I don't want to piss you off.
You're going to listen.
I want to listen.
Listen.
I want to know what law.
You still talking. I'm telling you to your face.
Yes.
Do not videotape us. If you come beyond that point.
Yeah, but I'm not beyond that point. I'm here at the restaurant.
If you come like you did before,
right,
come beyond that point, you're going to jail, sir, because it could be used for terrorist activity. Right now, you're in violation because
what kind of terrorism?
Because people know a time, the date. You gave an explanation about TSA.
Yeah, but I'm a reporter. But I'm a reporter.
Show me ID with a reporter. Did you approach us and say, hey, I want to take video?
I didn't think I had to. I thought this was America.
Oh, yeah. No, America, nothing. You know better. Where's your ID?
I'm not doing anything illegal.
Yeah, yes you are.
I'm not going to give you my. I'm not doing anything illegal.
Let me have your ID.
For what's the reason?
Because
I'm not at the security checkpoint. I'm not at the Amtrak.
Wait a minute. You did do it. We just didn't catch you. You got to remember something. You did a violation. We didn't know what was going to go on YouTube. I would like to take this video. And the video didn't even come. It came from the government. They sent it to us because now somebody's taking pictures of us doing our activity.
There's policies and procedures. You're obviously a rookie journalist because any seasoned journalist would know that you follow policy and procedure. Your policy, if you wanted to record, was to go to the management.
It was an impromptu recording. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
A normal journalist and a professional journalist would know to go to the management office, okay, get a permit, who you are, why you're, let me finish, who you are, what you're doing and why you're doing it. Then they escort you, and you are able to execute your First Amendment right.
But my permit is the Constitution. You don't need a specific permit to film.
For me, journalism is reporting something that somebody somewhere wants to suppress. And to me, that is a lot more professional than having a government escort and asking permission to film something that our government is doing.
And thank you, Luke. Thank you, Julio. You know, what Julio said right there is at the end, my permit is the Constitution. And if that video doesn't get your blood boiling, I don't know what will, because that is a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment and, you know, blatantly unconstitutional. Meanwhile, the TSA, you know, they've announced that they are going to expand their Viper program. It will now include, you know, bus terminals, train stations, and even roadside checkpoints of commercial vehicles. So they have simply gotten out of control. And you know, and after that fiasco and the tragedy in Aurora, Colorado, don't be surprised if next thing you see is TSA groping your kids before you go into a movie theater. Mark my words, they're going to hype up security big time. So, all right, before we go to break, we're actually we got a new study that, here's an interesting study that was just released about the effects of fluoride. And this is a Harvard study that finds fluoride, it lowers your IQ. This was published in a federal government journal. Harvard study finds fluoride lowers IQ. Harvard University researchers' review of fluoride brain studies conclude, quote, our results support the possibility of adverse effects of fluoride exposure on children's neurodevelopment. And it goes on to say significantly lower IQ than those who lived in low fluoride areas. Further, the EPA says that fluoride is a chemical with substantial evidence of development neurotoxicity. You know, we've been telling you this stuff for years, folks, but how much you want to make a bet that it's not going to prevent, you know, most cities from removing the fluoride from our water supply. In fact, they might even make it a state mandate, you know, that the state will step in and make sure that all the communities fluoridate our water supply. But interesting results just the same. Hey, and that's going to bring us to our quote of the day. This one from Henry Kissinger. Today, Americans would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will pledge with world leaders to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by their world government. That was Henry Kissinger in an address to the Bilderberg meeting in France. This was back in 1992. And that's going to do it for the first half of our show. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, Aaron Dykes sits down and talks with the author of Fleshing Out Skull and Bones. His name is Kris Millegan, and he will be with Aaron Dykes via video Skype when we come back right after this.
We are back on the Infowars Nightly News, and we turn now to an interview segment. A real expert on skull and bones, somebody who's really put together a research volume, not only of his work and his research and the things he's privy to, but the research of others, including Anthony Sutton, who's really has been the expert on skull and bones, people like Webster Tarpley, who covered it in their Bush biography, and Charlotte Thompson Iserby, who leaked the list to us, and other important researchers. It's Kris Millegan. He's the publisher of Trine Day, and this book, Fleshing Out Skull and Bones, has really everything in it. So we're glad he's joining us. Kris, thanks very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
So first of all, your father was in the CIA, and this helped you get into the whole area, the whole subject area. Why don't you tell us about your background and your family's background and how you came to find out about the New World Order, skull and bones, and all the related subjects?
Well, my daddy told me, and I didn't believe him. My father got involved in intelligence in the 1930s as an exchange student to the University of Shanghai. And he left Shanghai in 1937, went across the Trans-Siberian Railway, went through Moscow, Berlin, ended up in London at the World Council of Conference Churches with the Dulles brothers. And then as soon as he graduated in 1939, he ended up going directly back to Washington, D.C. He had been scheduled to go to school in Switzerland, but the war came along, and he was soon working in the basement of the Library of Congress under Archibald MacLeish, who was a member of the Order of Skull and Bones and who was a Librarian of Congress and a member of OSS. And my father was in COI, which was Donovan's, Wild Bill Donovan, the gentleman who headed OSS, his first organization, and then he was in OSS. And then in 1943, he got involved in deep politics. They took him out of the basement of the Library of Congress, put him into the military, gave him 2 weeks of training, which was the shortest amount of training you could give somebody and certify him as being in the military, which was medics training, made him a lieutenant, and also put him in G2, and then put him on MacArthur's staff because there was people in Washington that didn't quite trust MacArthur and Willoughby, who was his aide. And then he went from, they sent a gentleman over, well, my dad started working with the guerrillas and went into Manila before the troops did, and was helping the guerrillas set up their diplomatic mission and their government. And in doing that, they put a bunch of the collaborators, the people, the Filipinos who had collaborated with the Japanese in jail. Well, those happened to be a bunch of MacArthur's friends because he had been raised in the Philippines. And so when he came back, he found a bunch of his friends in jail and found out that my father was involved with it. And they said, get rid of my dad. And the person they brought in to get rid of my dad was a gentleman by the name of Edwin Lansdale. And if anybody's looked into what you want to call conspiracy literature, you'll find that Mr. Lansdale is quite prominent in it. And he used to come over to the family house. And then my dad, again, went into the CIA. His last overt job there was branch chief head of all of East Asia Analysis Office. And then he went covert and ended up in 1956 as a little child, and we were told that my dad was going to East Asia, and he was going to write a book, which had never been written. And then all of a sudden, a couple years after that visit, we moved from Virginia, moved to Tennessee, where my dad became a vice president of a college, and then all of a sudden we moved from Tennessee out to Oregon. And I was just a little kid and didn't really know what was going on. But later on, I found out in the late 60s, my dad asked me what I thought of the Vietnam War. And being raised on John Wayne and World War II, and being a teenager, I gave my dad a flip answer. I said, oh, you had a sack of hand grenades and some rice patties, and you went and threw the hand grenades and won it for the good guys wearing the white hats. And my dad looked at me and said we had to have a talk. And now, I had known my dad had been in intelligence, but it wasn't because he had talked to me or because my big brother and my big sister, we would talk among ourselves, and it was just something that we knew, but it wasn't something that was talked about at the family table or anything. And he waited for a little while till there was this professor in town, Professor D.F. Fleming from Vanderbilt, and my dad told me it was time to have this talk, and I was about 19, and this was the late 60s. I'd married young. I was married and had a record store and was putting on rock and roll dances. And he took me in my little brother's room and sat me down and started off this conversation. And he looked at me and he said, the Vietnam War is about drugs. And then he said, there's these secret societies behind them. And I'm thinking, okay, my dad's talking about the mafia. And then I'm thinking, okay, and then he says, and communism's all a sham. These same secret societies are behind it all. It's all a big game. And at that point in time, I'm thinking my dad is completely nuts. I mean, I'd been gone to school, and they'd stuffed us underneath the desk because the Ruskies were going to bomb us. And it just didn't make any sense to me. And then this little light came on in my head. I figured, well, my dad's having a drug talk with me, because it was the late 60s and I was growing my hair long and smoking a little pot. So I figured my dad's going to, tell me to stop smoking pot. So I kind of up and, and get ready to say, yes, sir. But he doesn't. He continues on telling me about his intelligence career. And I learned quite a bit about, he starts talking to me about, they feel that they're playing out a lose scenario in the Vietnam War. And he starts talking to me about psychological warfare and propaganda. And he's telling me the stuff in the newspaper, sway pieces. And again, I'd been a paper boy for, I don't know, ever since 7th grade. It didn't make any sense to me. He'd get up in the morning with me, read the paper and everything. And, it just didn't make any sense to me. And pretty soon it became quite apparent that I had no idea what they were talking about. So I just kind of, went on with my life, and again, would talk with my dad now and then, and would have some arguments also. And one thing I learned out of those arguments was that he told me that there was a plan to opiate my whole generation, the whole boomer generation. And it just, again, I didn't quite understand it, but I started to read about, well, I'd always been reading about the Kennedy assassination, but I started reading about CIA drugs and stuff like that. And I would tell people about some stuff that my dad told me, and they'd look at me and they'd say, well, you're a conspiracy theorist. And this was like in the 70s, and I says, well, what's a conspiracy theorist? So I kind of took, started looking at CIA drugs, and then also the subject of conspiracy theory, and kind of took it on as a discipline, and just started researching. And then about 1988, I ran into Anthony Sutton's book, America's Secret Establishment, and that started making some sense to me, what my dad had told me some years before. And my father had, last years of his life, he had cancer and Parkinson's, so I really couldn't talk to him much. But so after he died, I was going through his papers. And at about this time, I was also doing a lot of research in CIA drugs, and was very interested in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And so Chiang Mai, Thailand is basically a heroin city. The big banks have branches here and everything. And I saw this trip that my dad went on in 1956. He went to Chiang Mai. So I'm thinking, great, I can talk to my mother and ask her, how big was Chiang Mai? Because I'd been told it had been a very small town, and now it's the second largest city in Thailand. And she said, yeah, in 56, it wasn't very big. Biggest thing in town was a church. They had some pictures of it. And so I was pulling down the picture book to look at the pictures. And my mother made this little aside, and she says, and that's when she stopped believing everything she read in the newspapers. And I asked her, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, because when they were in Thailand, the big story was about this big battle in Vietnam, and right where they had been. And she said, there was no battle. We were having a picnic. So I go and turn the picture book back from Chiang Mai, and sure enough, there's Colonel Lansdale and my dad, and some people with fatigues on, and berets and stuff, and they're having a picnic. And there's this beautiful picture of my mother, which ended up being used in her memorial. And it says out from the side, it says Eudora, that was her name, Eudora out from Saigon with Colonel Lansdale and North Vietnamese military leaders. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so what my dad said was absolutely true about the Vietnam War being about drugs. And they took American boys and girls and sent them to hell for 1 year. Okay? And those boys and girls knew that after 1 year, they got to go home. Well, some of those boys and girls got addicted to the heroin that was being proffered to them by whole kinds of people over there. And then you have, heroin addicts that they get sent back, and what do? They start selling heroin, okay? And so, I mean, this kind of demonstrates the perfidy of what's going on, what goes on with as our foreign policy, and the psychological games. Because, see, you can go into books, conspiracy theory books, and you can, people will say, well, the FBI, made the Summer of Love and all of this type of stuff. And basically that's, they did want to create a drugged out peace generation as an antithesis to our parents' generation, and also as I call them a hat rack in the room, but something that you can talk about. And they were able to, use that as a pretext for the war on drugs, which is still going on, to assault our Constitution and to move us away from our republic into the empire that we live in now, And so that's how I got into it. My dad told me some things I didn't believe, and I started looking into it. And once you start looking into this material, you find validation. And I would get books, and I'd read the book, and I'd get to the end, look at the bibliography, go to those books, and pretty soon you're out of conspiracy theory books, and you're into dry books about banking and business and all kinds of other stuff. And because it's not easy talking about this stuff to people. I mean, you get called names, you get all kinds of BS, and if it wasn't true, Lord have mercy, I would have dropped it along.
Right.
I would talk with Anthony Sutton. I asked Anthony. I mean, and in the book there's Anthony's last words, and we took a bunch of things out of his different newsletters and out of his bibliography and put him in there so people know who Anthony was, because Anthony gave up. I asked him one time, was this a good career move, looking into Skull and Bones? And
obviously not.
He had to laugh. Yeah, there was he even before he was looking into Skull and Bones, he was working at the Hoover Institute at Stanford. And
well, hold on a second. Let's get into that after. Let's just start with the most basic question, because we have new viewers out there, but also for the old people who do know what Skull and Bones. Let's just talk about what is Skull and Bones. We know they have very prominent members in positions throughout government, in media, in business, but what is the group itself? And then let's branch into Sutton's writings and the things he discovered.
Well, they're a secret society. I mean, they try and say, oh, we're just a fraternity or stuff like that. No, but they are the classic definition of a secret society. And if you look at them through sociology, secret societies are the same all over the world. You've got an outer layer that are good for favors and window dressing. In Masonic circles, they call them porch brethren. Then you have an administrative cadre, because at any time you have people who turn the lights on and turn the lights off. And then you have a core group. And the core group at Skull and Bones, they're all related. At any secret society, the core group is all related. They're all cousins. Skull and Bones is built around the Cabot family with a very strong substanding of the Whitney family.
Right. And those are some of the oldest families in America. For the most part, they go back to royal blood as well. Is that what you found?
Well, yes, they go back to royal blood. They also go back to Calvinists. And both Harvard and Yale were set up as schools for Calvinist clerics. And the group that actually came to New Haven, where Skull and Bones is based, were, besides being Calvinists, were hyper-Calvinists. And Calvinists, they believed that Christ only came for them. They were going to be, there was going to be a new world, and they were going to be one of the 144,000. They came over with a judge and a prophet, and only certain male landowners could vote and stuff like that. They had the 7 pillars of the community. And they also believed in a thing that is called hyper-Calvinism. And with hyper-Calvinism, they not only believe that there's an elect in heaven, but they believe there's an elect in hell.
Mm-hmm.
And you take that type of belief, and then in the late 1700s and the early 1800s, you had the Enlightenment come in, which brought in Western ritual magic, brought in, the stuff about Egypt and Greece and stuff like that. And you take Western ritual magic and you kind of marry that, which is very dualistic, and you marry that with this Calvinist belief of there's an elect in hell, and you end up with a group like Skull and Bones, which, when you look at them from an occult standpoint, from a magical standpoint, they're sorcerers who perform death magic. They believe by killing people, they get power.
Wow. That's chilling right there. So, but then that's not exactly the things Anthony Sutton was writing about. He was very much dealing with things from foreign policy standpoint. Where does the secret society and ritual magic elements, where does the rubber meet the road with the tangible things we see our government doing and so forth and so on?
In Elite Deviants, one thing they talk about, they say that between 1860 and 1960, there were two big, large federal corruptions. Then starting in 1960, we get these huge corruptions that happen that have very big social consequences. And the thing that's most interesting is almost the same players are involved with it, and the same institutions. And you see, it's my contention that one of the things that Skull and Bones does through their control of the government, because, part of their shtick, we can go back to Washington when he was talking. We had a first Illuminati scare here in the late 1700s, and he wrote a letter. Somebody asked him about the Illuminati, and he said, yes, the Illuminati are here, and their tenets, their basic tenet is to divorce us from our institutions and our faith, our family, and our government. And part of their shtick is for them to make us think that our government is bad and evil. And our government is not bad or evil. We need government, okay? But they have corrupted our government and used our government against us, which is just criminal. I mean, these guys are criminal. And part of their thing is they do huge amounts of psychological warfare against us. Most of our election cycles have not been about, will my vote with a bunch of other votes elect a person? Okay, these elections have been controlled for quite a while, and they're about polarization. They're about polarizing us, getting us into different camps so that we don't like those people over there and they don't like us, so that we're just fighting each other. And then the other big thing that they do is, just as in propaganda, psychological warfare, and mind control basically works out of a trance, okay? You put people under hypnosis, okay? You can put the whole country under hypnosis by having them watch TV. Our televisions have a 60 cycle, run on 60 cycles. They have a little flicker in there. That little flicker, you read any book about hypnosis, will tell you that 60 cycles put you into a trance, okay? And the next part of mind control is, once you're into the trance, hypnosis, you won't do things that you normally do, so they'll have you play a character in a book or a play or a movie or something like that. Then beyond that is trauma. They do trauma, and they found out that, if they traumatize little children, they'll split into multiple personalities, and then they can program these different personalities. And then past the trauma is ritual. And, it's very interesting. You go to the survivor conferences and you talk to these people that are from their 80s on down to their 20s that have had gone through some of this training. And you can see the progression of the science. And then also you listen to the talks that these people give, because some of these mind control survivors have become doctors of psychiatry and the other one. There's psychiatry and what's the other?
Psychology?
Psychology, yes, to just understand themselves, and so one thing that the secret societal system has done, okay, to play with our minds and to play with our society, they've done these huge big rituals. When you look at the Kennedy assassination, okay, and you look at it really, really hard, at the end of the day, it's a ritual. It's an occult ritual called the killing of the king. It's written about in books, Fraser, in the 1930s, mm-hmm. and then you look at 9/11, and these are very much straight classic mind control. Okay, and we had the idiot's son, a member of the Order of Skull and Bones, as president when that was done. And when you look at the history of Skull and Bones, they like to have one of their own members, as the head person when they do some of these things, and when they do certain operations. And because like with 9/11, I cannot say over as many times as we saw a plane going into a building over and over and over and over again that morning. I mean, that's classic mind control, okay? Because you've been on an airplane, you've been in an office building, you know that those are innocent people. We sat there and we watched innocent people dying over and over and over again. That puts you into shock, okay? Right. And they smashed this huge big archetype, the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center, that they spent so much money into getting into our heads that this was this big symbol of America's power and everything. And then they smash it, and then they build the country back up the way they want, and where we go to war. And again, like I say, death magic. By killing, 3,000 people, they got the power to take our huge country and all that it possesses to war, okay? And, before then, they used to at least keep up a fiction that we don't kill people. Now we all know that the president has in his desk a list of people that he kills. Some of them are even Americans, okay? And then, if you've flown a plane in the last, gone on an airplane the last 10 years, you've had to submit to, a complete degradation just to get on an airplane. Okay. And so that's one thing I see the secret societal doing is doing these huge, big, mass rituals for control. And it's not about getting them more money. It's about control. It's about control.
Well, let me bring this up. I don't know if it's a side point to your overall argument, but it's certainly related. If you go back to Iserby's arguments about the educational roots and people like Hegel in Germany, and Sutton has the same research, psychology, psyche, that's the soul. They actually didn't want to mess with the soul. They said they wanted to bypass it and use animal programming to control us, basically.
Absolutely. I mean, they keep dumbing us down. They keep making us more gross. They absolutely. They try to bring the animal out in us because the animal is more easily to control than a quote unquote human. Okay, and Johann Wolfgang Fichten, his third address to the German people in 1805, says, we're going to take your children and we're going to teach them when and how to think. And they created the three schools, the academies for the elite, the institutes for the helpers of the elite, and the folk schools. And they found that if they took the classical education, broke it apart, didn't teach a bunch of the subjects, like they didn't teach you dialectic, they don't teach you logic, they don't teach you rhetoric, then you couldn't stand on your own 2 feet, okay? And they put bells in between, taught the subjects for about an hour, put bells in between. They found they could put a false construct around us. I mean, it's absolutely true. I mean, Dewey and Mann weren't members of the Order of Skull and Bones, but every time that Dewey and Mann needed money, there was a guy from Skull and Bones handing them money so they could go to Germany and bring the Prussian education system here.
Right, and there were other educators who were members of the order, and Iserby and Sutton outlined who they were and when they went over and how they're connected.
Absolutely. You had
Daniel Coyne Gilman is one of them, I think.
Right. Gilman. Well, Gilman was a very interesting gentleman. He was one of their not their last beard, their second to last beard. And beard, I mean front man for Skull and Bones. And he incorporated Skull and Bones and was a librarian there at New Haven. And then he went on to become the first president of Johns Hopkins University, which basically gives us the the medicine system that we have today, and was also the first president of University of California there in Berkeley. And there's a street named after him there, and there's a big connection between San Francisco and Skull and Bones.
Yeah, flesh that out for us, if you will.
Well, here's how the secret societies rule the world. Okay, I mean it's a basic leviathan of 3 levels, and each level has 3 parts. And the top level is mining, metal, and money. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. I mean, if you control the mining, then you have a good chance of controlling the metal, then you have a good chance of controlling the money. I mean, it used to be that our money was metal. And when you look at Skull and Bones, when you look at the members, you find a lot of mining engineers. Matter of fact, Charlotte Iserbyt's family came into it through
her
mining. Grandfather, who was the first member, was a gold mining engineer. And but like the Dodges and the Kellogg's of Skull and Bones aren't the Dodges and Kellogg's of the cars and the cereal. They're the Dodges and Kellogg's of minings, and they have the Ansons and the Stokes and the Phelps and all of this. And you look at the history of California and Arizona both, and you find these guys from Skull and Bones there scooping up the mineral rights right at the beginning. And then the next level is drugs, guns, and oil. And it was a gentleman from Skull and Bones, Dr. Benjamin Silliman Jr., who in 1855 made gasoline for the first time out of petroleum, rock oil. Okay, and he did this for the Rock Oil Company of Pennsylvania. And it was based in New York, but and it was for the Bissells and for the Townsends. And he wrote a report, and he said, "Gee, gentlemen, I think you have some very inexpensive products with a very inexpensive process. Some very valuable products with a very inexpensive process." And as soon as he wrote that report, the Pennsylvania Rock Oil Company of New York passed into hands of investors of New Haven, Connecticut. And then they proceeded to monopolize everything around oil. The internal combustion engines patents go back to the 1840s. They'd been using a coal gas that you can make, and they proceeded to just monopolize it around health, around plastics, and so much so that Mr. Diesel over in Europe. And if you read his writings, he says, "I'm doing this because I have a social consciousness, and I do not want the small industrialist and the farmer to be beholden to this monopoly." So he presented his diesel engine at the Paris exhibition of 1900, ran it 24/7 on nothing but peanut oil. Mm-hmm. Anything you can squish between 2 stones, okay? Well, they hounded his patent, they hounded his money. Finally, a guy in England said, "Oh, Rudolph, I'll help you." So Rudolph got in a boat, and everybody woke up the next morning, and Rudolph had he had a little accident. He committed suicide, jumped overboard, and soon his engine then was retrofitted to run on petrochemicals, and it was started to run on just any kind of bio fuel. And the only reason we go to the oil store is because these guys own it. And, drugs, Skull and Bones was started by a drug smuggler and a family and a politician. The politician grew up to be the Attorney General of Ulysses S. Grant administration, very corrupt administration. And from a pragmatic standpoint, okay, if you want to look at their ability to control the country, okay, it goes to the 13th Amendment of the Constitution. There used to be a completely different 13th Amendment of the Constitution. It was ratified in Virginia, printed in constitutions up through the 1870s, okay, when this gentleman was Attorney General. They were able to say, "Oh, well, that thing didn't really get ratified and blah, blah, blah. And so, I mean, that's their ability to hoodwink us, to make us think that something else is going on. And in the 13th Amendment basically has to do with lawyers and whether they're going to be a lawyer and work for the bar out of England, or if they're going to be a member of our government. It basically says you can either be a lawyer or you can't be in the government. And so, and drugs, guns, and oil. And guns, I mean, the Whitneys, if you look at the history of Connecticut, where Skull and Bones is based, all the Browning automatic weapons of World War I and World War II were made in a factory just right up the street from the Skull and Bones Temple. That's what they call it. We call it, us barbarians call it the tomb, but they call it their. And all the, GE is based out of Connecticut. All the jet engines, the submarines, were based out of Groton, Connecticut. The helicopters started there. Huge military might is built there in Connecticut. And then how the last level is media, movies, and quote unquote magic. And that, again, is their ability to hoodwink us, to make us think something else is going on, and their preponderance of using these rituals as part of their control mechanism.
Well, let's shift, if we can, into some of the foreign policy stuff. A lot of it Anthony Sutton outlined, but you've got the class of 1917 Skull and Bones. I think about half of them went to work for Averell Harriman's Brown Brothers Harriman. He's, of course, from the Whitney family, as you pointed out. That's where Prescott Bush comes into the picture, the Walker side of the family, and a lot of other notable Skull and Bones people. And they were involved in the Soviet coup, they were involved in backing the Nazis, and a whole lot more. What's your take on that whole?
Well, my take on it is the Nazis didn't lose the war. They were brought over here by the Dulles brothers against direct written orders from Harry Truman. And it's you can only do the iron hand. The iron hand doesn't really work. I mean, there's too much opposition, so they have to do it through the soft hand. Basically, Prescott Bush was involved with counterintelligence in World War II. World War I. Prescott started off training as artillery, but he left World War II as an intelligence aide. And that's basically how, he got away with running the German steel industry through the Union Banking Corporation. That's basically what it was. It was a holding company for German Steel, Thyssen, which was the largest manufacturer, and had a lot to do with helping set up Auschwitz. Because he claims to be counterintelligence. Okay, I mean, and right now you look at foreign policy, which is really run more by the intelligence services than by the State Department. Right now, they're supposed to tell 8 people what they're doing, okay? And sometimes that gets down to just 4 people that they have to tell. And if you look at those people they have to tell, one of the main people they have to tell right now is Dianne Feinstein. Well, you look at Dianne Feinstein and her new husband, Mr. Bloom, and you find that they're involved in all kinds of operations because, see, once the intelligence services have to, can talk to you, then you get to do things for them. And if you look at their net wealth has just skyrocketed. And they're doing all kinds of interesting things with China and whatnot, because as far as I'm concerned, the end game of the secret societal system is to rule the world through China. And right now, all they're doing is they're using America's blood and wallet to get the world into shape. And what is it that we're doing? We're going into places in Africa and in Asia, basically where, the tribes still rule. Okay, there's no really government rule. Okay, and so it's basically, kill the Indians and take their land. And once they get the world into shape, okay, China stands up and says, "Cur American war dog. We're Chinese. We've got 5,000 years of civilization. Confucius, peace, peace, peace. Oh, and by the way, please send all the money to us because we have all the factories." And, so, I mean, that's what I see the secret societal system. And their foreign policy has basically been about control, about controlling the foreign policy, getting America, involved. I mean, and again, going back to the founder, you have William Huntington Russell, the drug person, and then you have Alfonso Taft. Okay, Alfonso Taft was Secretary of State and also Secretary of War, among many other things. And we as a culture, as a society altogether, we have what are known as self-correcting devices, because we really aren't on a death trip. We aren't looking to just all kill ourselves here. And the first self-correcting device is something I call it the dark hallway. It's known to us as the historical dialectic. And basically, you walk down a dark hallway a while and you bump into one side, and then after a while you bump into the other side. Well, I say some things that I know that are true about drug smuggling, intelligence agencies, and secret societies. And then I find people that I know that are spooks saying stuff just a little bit wilder that has some truth in it, but also has a bunch of non-truth in it. And that's because by controlling the extremes, you control the middle, okay? The next self-correcting device is a thing called the cycle of generations. And again, there's a very good book out of sociology called Generations, A History of America's Future. And they go in back to the 12th century and show how there's these 4 generations that continue through history, and they just help each other move things along. And they show in that book how, because of the Civil War and the assassination of a president, there was a generation that didn't cohese. And some of the people went out, joined the generation ahead of them. Some joined generations after them. Some just went out in the woods and did weird stuff. Well, once we're only 3 instead of 4, we're weaker as a culture, as a society. And with that weakness, and they're starting to control the government, they were able then to get us into the Spanish-American War, which was, done through a false flag event, done through, It
was an admitted fraud, using the media to goad them all along.
Right, yellow journalism, okay, and at its core, it was about drugs, okay, because you see, these guys made huge amounts of money smuggling drugs to China. After the Second Opium War in the mid-1800s, they lost their cash cow. Okay, it took a while for the Chinese to realize that, wait a minute, I don't need you smugglers anymore. I can just call up India and have them send me a boatload, and I'll pay the duties and whatnot. But you can see in international finance where they lost their cash cow, and they went from controlling numbers in corporations to not as much. And so, because the Spanish-American War, you had Teddy Roosevelt. And see, the Roosevelts were heavily involved with the opium trade at one time. They were ship owners and ship captains. And then Franklin Roosevelt's grandfather, Warren Delano, was the chief factor for Russell and Company in Canton for 20 years. And so the family was heavily involved with it. Well, Teddy Roosevelt was Under Secretary of Navy. He told the Secretary of the Navy had the gout one day. And this was before Spanish-American War, and the Secretary went home early. Teddy stepped up to the desk, sent off a bunch of messages. The Secretary of the Navy came back the next day and said, "Teddy, what did you do?" and never left again early again. And basically what Teddy had done, he'd sent some messages to Dewey, because once the war got declared, we didn't go into Cuba right away. But we took the Philippines just right away. Okay, and the Filipinos were also fighting the Spanish too, but we met the Filipinos at the shore and said, "Oh, my little brown brother," and fought a horrendous war there against the Filipinos to take control over those islands. And it was because, see, Manila is the oldest Western port in East Asia, and it was very important to these opium smugglers. And so Arthur MacArthur was the first military governor of the Philippines, and who they sent over to be the first, they declared the war over before it was over and sent over the first civilian governor, and that was William Howard Taft, son of the founder of the Order of Skull and Bones and a member of the Order of Skull and Bones. Well, William McKinley asked Taft twice to be on the Supreme Court. That's a lifetime appointment. He turned him down twice. And if you look at the historical record, then McKinley got shot, and Teddy Roosevelt became president, and he asked Taft to be Secretary of War, and Taft said, "Okay, I'll be Secretary of War." If you look at what he did in the Philippines between being asked to be on the Supreme Court and finally leaving, was he had made opium illegal for the first time in modern Asia, and then he started the initiatives that started the Hague and the Shanghai Convention, which gives us our prohibitions that we have today. And these prohibitions have nothing to do with our health, have nothing to do with our children, have nothing to do with our community. They have to do with keeping in place a black market, which allows forces from out of the shadows to sell plants for more than gold. So that's, you know, that was, they got the Spanish-American War, okay? And then the next thing, what do they do? Well, Taft was president, and they got in place the Federal Reserve. Now, Taft said he wasn't for it, and so Wilson got Wilson in, and it was passed in the first year of Wilson's on, Christmas Eve. And an interesting thing is Skull and Bones was United States Treasurer at the time, and as it was also a member of Skull and Bones who was the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which is the most important bank. Okay, and so you get the Federal Reserve System in, which is fake money that's owned by somebody else, not by the people. Okay, and so then what do you have to do? Well, you got to get an income tax system. So they got the income tax system in, which was again done illegally. And so then you got to get something for people to get in debt to. So then you got World War I, you got World War II, and then they had this target date of 1950. And they wanted to have in place in 1950, having two things. They wanted to have in television and this modern education system. And you look at the modern education system, it was brought to us quite openly through a big campaign through the Masons, okay? And television, well, you look at Sarnoff and Paley, okay, of CBS, they were both involved in psychological warfare in the military in World War II. Paley had CBS radio before World War II, and after World War II, he wanted to start CBS television. He went to Prescott Bush at Brown Brothers Harriman. Prescott Bush raised all the money for CBS and was on the board of directors until the day he died.
Wow.
And then, like I say, they wanted to create this drugged out peace generation, okay? And but it kind of backfired on them, because when they were doing this illegality of drugs, they wanted to include cannabis. And one of the things that my studies in CIA drugs showed, that the whole cannabis is a gateway drug and all of that was an op that these guys had been starting to set up, so that their target was to opiate our whole generation, because they wanted to, again, get rid of a generation, make us weaker, okay? But for want of a better term, the cycle of generations has more moving parts, and so it's more intelligent, okay? And so the boomer generation, we saw all these assassinations, saw this war, all this dissension, and we jumped aside and created a counterculture, okay? And this counterculture was able to sustain itself because some of the people of the generation in the 1860s just went out in the woods and did weird stuff, and this culture was basically a joint of cannabis around a circle, okay? And what came out of the hippies, okay? The History Channel did a big 2-hour special about the hippies, and they said, what came out of the hippies? was the personal computer and the internet. Okay? And those are the tools that we as a society are using to fight this corruption that the secret societies are bringing to us, because that's all it is. It's just corruption and criminality. Okay? But the personal computer allows me to talk to you right now. And also it allows me, one person, to make a book. Okay? And the internet allows me to tell people about it. And the only thing we have from the historical record that even close is like Gutenberg's press. And Gutenberg's press got rid of the oligarchy of that day, which if you didn't believe them, they burnt you at a stake, and then brought us our republic by the books that were printed and were passed around. So I'm very hopeful because, you know, I started looking into this before the personal computer and the internet, and they were very much able to sequester this information because, I mean, Anthony was writing his books. There were people that were writing this, but the information was very sequestered, and you know, and now, you know, we're talking about it. It's good, and so I think good.
Well,
things
yeah, absolutely, because books throughout history, the ability to read throughout history, I mean, has been very limited to the most powerful classes. Of course, now we have more widespread literacy, but there's still the limitation of it takes time to read it. You got to get your hands on it. Television was always meant to dumb us down and have us hand-fed limited channels of information. And you're right, the internet has blown all of that wide open, the pace of information and the amount of information available, and of course the interactivity. It's not someone hand-feeding you the info. You can create your own info and push it out.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the internet plays with time and space. You know, it doesn't allow them to keep their intelligence operators in the dark so much, okay? Because they can find out, you know, why it is that they're doing what they're doing instead of, you know, figuring it out after 20 years after they've been retired and say, oh my gosh, that's why I did that, you know, because. And so I'm very hopeful, and you know, I'm thankful for you having me on here so that I can expound.
We're glad you could join us as well. Actually, do you want to talk a little bit about Trine Day and how that came out and how you got your hands on all these alternative books, stuff that nobody else really would publish, you've been able to bring out to the world through this company?
Well, I was... once the internet came around, I mean, I'd been starting to write about Skull and Bones a little bit before the internet, and was trying to get, you know, I'd send it off to magazines and all kinds of places and book publishers. Nobody would do anything. And then the internet came around. I got to meet Anthony Sutton through the internet, became good friends with him. And then I was running an email list, so I still do, called CIA Drugs. And there was a gentleman on there, Daniel Hopsicker, and he was decrying. He says, you know, my book has been with an agent in New York for 2 years and nobody's going to print it. And after hearing that for a while, I finally said, well, Daniel, I've got a computer on my desk and they tell me I can make a book. Let's do it. So I helped Daniel make a book. And then Anthony told me his book was going out of print because at first nobody would print his book here, and he had to get them printed overseas, and they started getting stolen off the docks. And he was running a little newsletter, and one of the members of his newsletter had a mom and pop print shop in Montana, and they said, what do you mean nobody will print it? And so they printed it for many years. But they were shutting up their shop and were retiring. And so it was going to go out of print. And I said, Anthony, it can't go out of print. And it's never been in hardback. We need to put it in hardback. See, we can't get into libraries. So I went out and borrowed $5,000 and started a printing company, or started Trine Day. And once we were out there, I mean, it was amazing the response I would get from, you know, all these different authors. I mean, I've got world-class authors, just a bunch of them, who nobody would print their books. No, nobody would print them. And, you know, I mean, I don't know, I read the Constitution. It seems to me there shouldn't be any problem in just printing a book. And so I just started. And it's been amazing because I call it suppressed, and there's a thirst and there's a hunger for, you know, people want to know what's going on? I mean, I want to know what's going on. You know, I mean, you know, I've got children, and I want to see a better world for them. And I mean, the changes that I've seen in my lifetime, if it keeps going the way it's going, they aren't going to have much chance of having a real life. So I do it because I like the Constitution of the United States, and I want a better life for our children. And, you know, I go to our website, tryingday.com, and please support us and buy some books.
And we've got a lot of them at Infowars, too, at our Infowars store, and here's just 3 of them. I think we have more than 10 of your titles, but of course, Fleshing Out Skull and Bones. And this is great because this used to be out of print. I think I got my personal copy when it was like $70. Now it's $25. That's an incredible deal because it's got Tarpley's work in here, Sutton's, your research, Iserby's. I don't know these other authors, Altman and Bunch, but there's so much information in this book. Anthony Sutton's book has charts and diagrams and follows the family names, the political connections, and America's Nazi Secret. We had Loftus on last week. He's also interesting on some of this whole hidden history driven by these secret societies. And once you open your mind to that and begin to follow the facts and realize this really is going on, it's not, quote, conspiracy nonsense or something, that this is based in the real history and it's just the beginning of understanding what the real history is, you'll never be the same. That's what I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you know, you remember a time, don't you, when you thought the Federal Reserve was part of the government and your money was real money?
Well, I think we all had to learn, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that, you know, I mean, it took me, what do you mean it's not part of the federal government? What do you mean? You know, but there's really no going back once you start to understand, you know. And so I strongly recommend people to look into it, find something that interests you and follow it down. And yet Mr. Loftus is just amazing. I mean, that book that we published of his had been nominated for a Pulitzer, and it had to gone through CIA censorship. When it was on 60 Minutes, Mike Wallace got an Emmy for the show that he had for that book. Then we finally get to publish it without having to go through CIA censorship, and you know, we get no interest from the mainstream media at all. Matter of fact, I get some AP reporters call me up and say, "Oh, send me a copy of the book," and we send them a copy of the book, and then about a week, 10 days later, these 2 guys have a front page story on the New York Times all about what's in Loftus's book, except not going quite as far. It's, you know, they're doing a modified limited hangout, and doesn't mention John, doesn't mention his book at all. You know, it's just amazing. And the stories I could tell you about what has happened in Hollywood, on people that have wanted to make these books into movies, it just, you know, makes you cry almost. I mean, it's just amazing. The stuff they pull. They don't like me printing books, but they definitely do not want any of these books and any of these stories into movies. They just pull out all the guns.
It's amazing, isn't it? You've pretty much said it about the drugs and the CIA, but there's no question that there's a common link, A, between Skull and Bones, CIA drug running, but B, between a lot of loosely connected, seemingly unconnected events from Iran-Contra and the modern day, JFK assassination, and so many coups and plots around the world, is there not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's when you start looking into it, it just literally blows your mind. I mean, Prouty, I strongly recommend people read Prouty. He was a very interesting gentleman. He was liaison to the CIA, to the Air Force. And so anytime anybody from the CIA needed something from the Air Force, they would have to go through him. And so he talks about the fake battles in Vietnam and Lansdale. Yeah. And there's another book out there I strongly recommend people read. It's called Gold Warriors. It's by Sterling Seagrave. It's not one of my books. It's Sterling Seagrave. He's the son of the Burma surgeon, so he grew up in Southeast Asia. And all of his books were Book of the Month Club and New York Times bestsellers until he wrote Gold Warriors. and he had to publish it himself. And finally, there was a version that came out from Verso out of Britain, and he had to move to France because he got so many death threats. And the story in that goes into the slush funds. And again, Lansdale is a big part of that book. And you just learn things about your history that we had no idea about.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up not the author you just mentioned, but also Fletcher Prouty. His book, Secret Team, outlays how Allen Dulles and really Harriman and some of these other people helped to bring the transformation of the CIA. They helped initially get in the National Security Act under Truman, which was this big sneak attack because they had secretly written the bill to transform the CIA from just an intelligence gathering agency, which would have been probably pretty reasonable, to transform it into this black ops carrying out assassinations and coups that it was obviously never designed to do.
Right. Robert Lovett, a member of Skull and Bones, chaired a committee that had a lot to do with bringing off the CIA. And yeah, no, it operates more for the intelligence services than it does for the secret societal network than it does for our country. I mean, our two largest black operations are drugs and continuance of government. And, you know, the continuity of government, continuance of government, my local congressman can't even, they won't even get him information about that. And, well, here's something to think about. Now, if you were a Rockefeller, you probably really wouldn't even have to work for a living if you didn't want to, right?
I suppose not. Yeah, you could probably. Mm-hmm.
But the Rockefellers looked at Arkansas and West Virginia and said, I think you guys need help for my governance there. Well, if you look at it, see, you have in West Virginia and Arkansas, you have huge mountainous areas, okay? You have the Ozarks and the Appalachians, okay? Mountainous areas are basically autonomous zones, okay? You can do whatever you want in a mountainous area until somebody comes and stops you, okay? And in West Virginia, you have...
coal, obviously.
Well, you have the continuance of government. You have, you know, they've got, is it Mount Weather? You've got a mountain there that they've got tunnels and all kinds of stuff. They got a complete cabinet, you know, underneath there. And then drugs. Mena, Arkansas is still in operation today. I mean, it's called Mena International Airport, okay? It's a grass runway way up in the Ozarks that's got, you know, hangars that help make the planes so that they can fly long distances and all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah, it's...
Yeah, you know, the History Channel had that big joke about the five brothers and how I think Nelson was going to take over South America, and I guess David was going to deal with Asia or something, and how the least of the brothers was just going to take over Arkansas. Well, he really did that, so how far does that joke go, kind of thing?
Right, well, you know, Watergate's very interesting because, again, it was a planned debacle. Okay, because they need to get rid of Nixon. I mean, where did Nixon come from? You need to have Loftus on again, and you can talk about Nixon. I mean, Nixon basically was a blackmailer. Okay, you read any of his, you know, transcripts and stuff. I mean, if there's a problem, if Nixon doesn't say, "Hey, we can blackmail him," one of his staff says, "Hey, we can blackmail him," because that was his modus operandi. And Nixon got into power by blackmailing the Dulles brothers. He was a lawyer running around New York at the end of the war, finishing up these contracts. He came across papers from Paperclip and Crossbow, and he blackmailed the Dulles brothers. And that's how come they sent, you know, you've got that cute picture of Prescott Bush, you know, fixing Nixon's hat. And, you know, Prescott was the guy. In 1952, okay, the lead guy for the Republicans was a member of Skull and Bones, Robert Taft, okay, but he was traditionally boring. And all the polling showed that Eisenhower would beat anybody, and it didn't matter if he was a Democrat, Republican, or something else. And so Prescott Bush went to Schaeff headquarters and asked Eisenhower, he says, Ike, what are you? We want to know what you are. Are you a Democrat or Republican? And Ike says, well, I'm a Republican. I thought you guys knew that. And then guess who shows up the very next week at SHAEF headquarters?
I'm guessing a Bush of some kind.
Averell Harriman.
Oh, okay, another Whitney, right.
Robert Lovett and Dean Acheson, okay, all working for Harry Truman at the time.
These are the wise men you're talking about, the so-called wise men. I've got the book cover right here. I'm showing people.
They show up, you know, and Lovett and Harriman are members of Skull and Bones, and Acheson's a member of Scroll and Key, another secret society.
Also at Yale.
At Yale, and you know, and you know, they then put Eisenhower in, okay, and they came to Ike because see, Ike was a guy who had put boys on the beach. Okay, he you know, he knew what it was to do an operation that people were going to die in. Okay, so they came to him and they says, hey, you know, we don't have to send boys on the beach. We can send in a couple spooks, and you know, and get it all done. And Ike says, oh yeah, and don't tell me because then you know I won't know anything. And they said, great. And so yeah, they really started putting in place, and then Watergate was basically about, you know, getting rid of Nixon, destroying, you know, helping destroy the office of the presidency, and it was about drugs and endgame, because before Watergate you had some drug thing that was set up through this military intelligence thing. So another drug thing that came through CIA counterintelligence through Angleton. You know, there was, you know, 5 or 6 of these little drug things that came in, and who was ever at the end of that had this little power fiefdom because they had money that was off the books, and then they also you garner intel through it, and so. They wanted to take all of those separate little things and put them into one aegis. And then Watergate was about endgame, because you had this guy by the name of, appointed president by the name of Leslie King. Okay, that's Gerald Ford's real name, is Leslie King. Okay, he comes from Omaha, Nebraska. For money, he comes out of the mind control milieu. Okay, and whenever they need a stooge in there, he's a handy stooge to him. And if Sarah Jane Moore or Squeaky Fromm, one of Manson's followers, would have been better shots, okay, Nelson Rockefeller would have been president of the United States. And because of the Nixon and Spiro Agnew thing, they had just changed the laws and stuff, and so he could have been president for, you know, 10 years or more. But that didn't happen. So what happened? After Gerald Ford, we had David Rockefeller bring up Jimmy Who, and they besmirched Jimmy Who.
A little peanut farmer.
Yeah, and brought us in, you know, Ronald Reagan and Vice President Bush. Bush basically ran that. I mean, and if Reagan didn't think so, I mean, they shot him, what was that, 80 days into the thing. Okay.
Very suspicious, very Bush.
And you know, and then Bush, they took all these drug things and put them through the aegis, basically through National Security Agency, because there you've got the military and you know, the spooks together, and you're running it through, what was his name? The guy out of Arkansas. He's an NSA.
Are you talking about Barry Seal?
Well, Barry Seal, but no, this is the guy Barry Seal was working for. He ran the Rose Law Firm. He was a big bond operator there. He had Altel. I just can't think of his name right now, but he was a big NSA guy. And you can see where they started taking the drugs money and then started putting it into the stock market in the 80s, about 82, 83. And then they started using all these big slush funds to really affect the economy, because, you know, Daniel Estulin started talking about this thing called demand destruction, something he got from the Bilderberg meeting notes. And it's basically, you know, how do you destroy demand? Well, you make it so people don't have money to buy things, okay? And so they use these big slush funds to, you know, affect the world economy and bring us to the situation where we're at today. But again, you know, I have great hope, because, you know, Theirs is just a house of cards, and it's not a very pretty house anyway. And I think we could build a much better house.
I do have hope, and I think it's through informing ourselves. I have to talk about Harriman just for a few more seconds because he's so interesting to me. He's kind of like a favorite villain. But what happened for me was when I begun to look into what's up with Prescott Bush and the Nazi financing, that's when I came to Sutton's book and a lot of your sources and things. But I also read these limited hangout books like The Wise Man by Walter Isaacson, who himself is a Rhodes Scholar. But at the same time, it's got a lot of great info. And on the white column, you've got Harriman, one of the most distinguished diplomats in American history. He was a governor. He could have been a president. He was our top ambassador to both Britain and Russia. Knew Stalin better than anyone else in history. But then when you read the real history, there's that black column where he's running all these things behind the scenes and really negotiating for his real friends who really run things while appearing to negotiate on behalf of our country. It blows me away how fascinating it is when you get into the details and learn who the names are.
Right. And then there's Stimson. You know, Stimson was Skull and Bones, and he worked for like 7 different presidents, you know, as Secretary of War, Secretary of Defense, and just all kinds of things. And I mean, he takes great pride into talking Harry Truman into dropping the bomb and all these kinds of things.
Exactly.
The Skull and Bones is very, very interesting. And if you want to, you know, understand what the world we live in today, you need to understand Skull and Bones.
Well, I think that says it all. We've gone over an hour. It's so interesting. I could literally talk for 3-4 hours without exhausting just the questions I have. Maybe we can have you back on and get into specific areas about Skull and Bones as well in the future. And but this was a great overview, and people definitely need to get your book. We have it at Infowars, $25.95 for, well, more than 700 pages of footnotes and information and really interesting illustrations, original documents, you name it. It's all in Fleshing Out Skull and Bones. We have it at Infowars, and Trine Day, of course, has it along with so many other interesting titles. Kris Millegan, it's been an honor to have you on, and we really appreciate picking your mind.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. My pleasure.
All right. Until we speak again, thanks for having us. And that's it for the Infowars Nightly News. We'll be back again next week, and we have a lot more to come in the future of this fight. But please help support us at prisonplanet.tv, where your membership helps funds our operation and allows you to get out the information. But, of course, we also have planetinfowars.com, where you can create accounts, get your networks going locally and around the world, and help fight this information war your way personally as you support us all helping to get this information out. Thanks. Good night.